everyone, Karen Roby here with Macy, Bayern, and Veronica Combs, talking today about the state of automation. And both of you have written some great articles here, different facets of automation and where we are with this, how companies are approaching their plans to automate. And Macy, let's start with you. Talk a little bit about just where we are right now, how companies are feeling about automation and their employees.
Sure. I think that, automation has been something that's become extremely prevalent in the past couple of years, but even more critical now that people are working remotely. I think companies like automation. There's no question that automation is something that is the way of the future, is useful for everybody. And when it comes down to it, automation right now is really helpful in expediting those menial processes, those monotonous tasks that people do. A lot of administrative efforts I've noticed are some of the most quickly automated things, because that opens up employees for more complex and cost-effective and impactful projects in organizations. And so there was this kind of, I think, fear around automation when it first became popular, that robots were going to steal everyone's jobs, when that doesn't really appear to be the case. It's really more that robots and AI and automation are helping people get their jobs done and are helping people to complete more meaningful work. And I'd written an article yesterday, I published it this morning, about how to create a resilient organization, especially during this pandemic. And one of the ways was to have an automated and human workforce, was to have that type of technology integrated into your company so that you can have your people doing the things that they were hired to do, rather than filling out paperwork or rather than doing timesheets and all of those sorts of things. So people like it, is the short answer. It is a good thing, and it is definitely something that is not going to go away anytime soon.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think artificial intelligence and machine learning are layered in so much more now into today's workforce. It's understandable why people are, like you said, just a little bit nervous about, well, what does this mean for my job? I'm not needed anymore, or the skills that I have can now be taken care of, in a different way. So that would definitely be somewhat scary for people. But it's interesting to see, though, that it is proving the opposite, Veronica. And I know there's some use cases that you've written about. Expand on that for us a little.
Yeah, so one of the most interesting companies I've written about is called Olive, and they call their robot a digital employee. And Olive is specially designed for hospital accounting departments, so healthcare accounting departments. So instead of a human submitting a procedure for approval, this robotic process does it. So apparently you still have to go and check and check and check, and has the insurance company approved this yet? And obviously it doesn't take any skill particularly, you just have to know what to look for. And so this robotic process can do that. And so the finance leader that I spoke to at a hospital in Connecticut, she said that they've involved their employees in this conversation from the beginning, so that, as Macy mentioned, it wouldn't be like, oh, we're losing our jobs, but this boring chunk is getting taken over by this robotic process. And the finance leader said that actually her department has been able to take on more work because this menial stuff has been taken over by a robotic process. And so, and Olive, as the company is based in Columbus, Ohio, and they call the employee Olive. And the founder's vision was to have sort of a network of Olives at different hospitals. And you can imagine, in this time of COVID-19, if some robotic process was keeping track of, how many ICU beds are full, how much capacity are we at, if they're looking for numbers or just sort of status, that could be a way for hospitals in a region to check in with one another and say, oh, there's a bed here, oh, there's a respirator here. So instead of governors necessarily having to track ventilators all over the country, you could have a more efficient and robotic process to do that. So that was one example that seemed really practical and hands-on, and something that you would say, oh, that makes sense. I want a robot to do this boring thing so I can, maybe help patients find financial resources to pay for things, or resubmit a claim that's been denied, or something that requires a little more thought.
Yeah, and it seems like, at this point, guys, that there's really, in order to stay competitive, businesses have to be putting automation at the top of their strategic agenda. That needs to be what they're working towards now. You can no longer just sit back and say, well, we might consider moving more towards that. That's not really the case anymore.
No, and I think it's about efficiency. And I think that that's what businesses are realizing, are that the companies that are integrating this type of automation are getting things done faster, are ahead of the curve. And the ones that aren't are feeling the effects of that, and maybe might feel like that they're getting a little left behind. And I think that with a lot of people I've talked to and a lot of articles I've written, it's very clear that automation is something that is inevitable and something that should be embraced rather than avoided.
I spoke to a company yesterday, Conga, and they help digitize a lot of front office procedures, like getting a contract signed or getting a quote signed. And so, since you can't walk down the hall anymore and say, "Hey, sign this," you have to have, as Macy said, it's a competitive advantage. You can't do business, you can't get revenue coming in if you can't get this thing signed. And so, I think the consultants that I talked to said there are still surprisingly a lot of companies still paper-based, right? What did they call it? A wet signature. Like, it's not just a Adobe signature and a PDF, but it's a pen and a piece of paper. So, and I asked them, so there's the laggards who are just now catching up, but then what about people who've been trying this for a while? Because they also said that you have to take it sort of a chunk at a time. You have to have a problem to address with automation, and then you can see where it fits in the workflow, how it can help people. It's not quite such a big disruption. It's easier to work this into your process. And they said that one company is trying to get all of their contracting digitized, so it does become a competitive advantage. So it's easier to contract with this company because it doesn't take a month. It takes a week because it's all computerized and it's in the system. It's not physical paper. So it's really interesting. I think it's a really important part of digital transformation, and you have to figure out, it's really about that, not about automation. It's about making that transformation and how automation can help you with that.
And I think for the interesting thing too, Macy, I know we've addressed this in the past, though, is really with just the different levels or generations that are working together. You know, when we talk about digital transformation in general, sometimes there's, friction between those that have been digital natives and some that are, still part of a company. And you've got, sometimes friction created there when people aren't all on the same page, and therefore they can't see what's ahead of them,
Totally.
the same way.
Exactly. And especially, I mean, like you said, with the digital natives, the Gen Zers and the younger millennials, I guess I should say, we've never known a world that didn't have automation or didn't have a form of technology involved with the way that we live. And so I think that integrating automation into an organization for younger people just is just the way of life. That just makes sense. Why wouldn't you do that? But for older generations who have been, signing the wet signatures for however long, doing these things is not only a learning curve, but that they might hesitate just because this is something foreign to them. This is something new, and so just another thing that they have to work with and have to deal with. And so it's definitely, like I said, a learning curve for others, but it is something that will unfortunately need to be embraced in order for a company to move forward. And is something that is actually kind of a connecting point for younger generations with older generations, because they can help one another work with those things. And I've written some things about that too, about how younger generations are connecting with their older counterparts because they're helping them to adapt to this technology faster than they would otherwise.
Yeah, and I think when we touched on, obviously, the time we're in right now with, facing this pandemic and looking ahead for when we move out of this, how things will look different, as a result of the crisis that we're living through right now. And, what happens to companies if they're going to operate in a different way. And it'll be interesting to see too, how, their mindset may change a little bit when it comes to automation now that we're living through this.
Definitely.
I just lost my train of thought. What I was going to say to wrap up. Hold on. Let me think for a second. Veronica, I don't want to cut you off. Is there anything else that you wanted to add?
I think the other interesting company that I've talked to recently is Four Kites.
Hold on, let me set you up better though than that. I just wanted to make sure first before I did. So do you want to, did you want Macy one more thing, or are you good?
I'm good.
You're good. Okay. So let me, Veronica, sorry, Mackenzie, let me just back up. I'll just say, I'll just give it a 3-2 and then so you're going to talk about one more company. Is that what you said, Veronica?
Yeah, I'll be brief.
Oh, that's fine. You can go as long as you want. I'm just going to say, I'll just say, okay. So 3, 2. Well, yeah, as we mentioned too, with what we're living through right now with this pandemic, it'll be interesting to see how things are different as we move forward, considering where we are right now and how things are changing in business, how we're organized and how we go about our days. And Veronica, it's been an interesting for you. I know that you have talked to so many different companies that look at automation in different ways and are approaching things as they make their roadmap for the future.
Right. And as a way to sort of capture institutional knowledge, like you might know that a process doesn't work because you've done it for years, but you can't say exactly why. And I think one illustration of that is in the supply chain, which of course has been really affected by COVID-19, both, that you don't have stuff to transport and maybe there's not people to transport it and we need it faster than ever. And so Four Kites is a company that's actually trying to make it a lot more transparent. And one thing that they're doing is connecting like the warehouse people with the shippers, with the clients, because previously everybody was in their separate silos, but now they have what they call one pane of glass. So everybody's looking at the same report. So like if you've worked in a warehouse for 15 years, you might know that this one driver is always late. And so there's financial penalties. Like Target will charge you a lot if you say, I'll be here at 5 and you don't get there till 7. And so that's part of the motivation for automating some of this stuff and getting it in one place. So if you know a truck's going to be late, you can say, well, let's do this truck first. And then they'll take off and not be penalized. And one of the interesting things was the CEO of Four Kites was telling me that, oftentimes the warehouse people had no idea that there was a fee or a big penalty for a shipment being late. And so now that everyone's kind of on the same page, I think that it's a way to take some of that institutional knowledge and digitize it and say, see, this is why this process doesn't work. You couldn't quantify it before and say, I told you. So hopefully this would be a way for people of all generations in a workforce to use these tools and to make things more efficient and get things done on time, which really in the end everybody wants, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely always looking for ways to be operate more efficiently and save on the bottom line, certainly. Well, guys, I know both of you all have some great articles, of course, up on Tech Republic. So many resources there for automation, artificial intelligence, machine learning, all of that good stuff there. So we hope that you'll check it out, of course, on Tech Republic and ZDNet. And thanks for being with me today, guys. And thank you all for watching. Stay safe.